Oh, good. It's live and I'm not muted. This is a great day. Hi, everybody. Welcome. This is a fireside chat with StartOut's Executive Director, Andres Wydler. That's that guy. And I'm Aaron Blumenthal. I'm Director of Platform at 500 Startups. And I hope you've been enjoying the event so far. I've heard great things. I heard that it was a very heartwarming session, this last one. Many of you were joining. That will not be this one. We're here to talk about stone cold outcomes and numbers and all that stuff. So before we launch into all that, Andres, give us a little bit about your background. How did you get where you are today?
Hi, well, thanks for having me, Aaron. Super excited to be here. How did it get here? Well, I've been an entrepreneur for 20 years and I identify as gay and was very excited about my community, but never had the time to do anything for my community other, of course, than writing checks, which is also important, but not good enough. So when StartOut called to find an executive director, they couldn't find anyone better. And so I ended up the one winning the golden ticket. That was five and a half years ago. I couldn't have made a better decision. Super excited to be running this organization and having a blast.
That's awesome. And for the audience, we're going to go where this conversation takes us. So feel free to jam any questions or comments or concerns or just anything that's on your mind into the comment section. I'll try to steer in that direction, but we've got a little bit of a light agenda. So let's dive into start out, and in particular, how we think about, measuring success, trying to bring diversity, inclusion, and all the rest of it, to the localities, organizations, and such that we support.
Yeah, sure. For those of you who don't know StartOut, we're a national nonprofit organization to support LGBTQ entrepreneurs. We're very mission-driven, very impact-driven, very business-like. So after the heartwarming session just before us, I'm terribly afraid to disappoint you, to focus all on impact and metrics and so on. But hopefully we have some stories too. But so our mission is to drive the number, the impact, and diversity of our entrepreneurs, and then amplify their stories. So yes, stories play a super important role. And the ultimate goal is, of course, the economic empowerment of our community. So, Aaron, to your question, how do we measure? Good question. So that's a question that everyone asks, right? So we have a macro level of measuring it, and that's the Startup Pride Economic Impact Index. Super exciting. You can get to it actually through inclusionindexes.org. And what we do there, we measure the impact of our entrepreneurs in terms of jobs, in terms of fundraising, what they've raised, in how many rounds, in terms of exits, and IP, how many patents they have filed and been granted. And the really cool thing is we're measuring what they've done, so the actual contributions, but we're also calculating what could have been done with equal access. So think about it, in terms of if everyone had equal access to resources, be that the Black community, the female entrepreneur community, be it the LGBTQ community, what could we have done? What's the unrealized potential? And what amazing economic performance there could have been with equal access. So I think that probably a lot of people in the audience relate to that, whether LGBTQ or other minorities or underrepresented communities, or simply the majority who want to help our communities.
It's really important because I know there's just a lot of organizations that talk a pretty big game when it comes to talking about things like, diversity, inclusion, and all that good stuff. But tell me a little bit more about measuring that delta. What is it that you hope that people will do with that information? How do you take that and turn that into action?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a lowball question. I love it. Love it. So we're measuring the actual contributions in terms of, we get the data from Crunchbase and PitchBook and others, and get the data on the businesses that the entrepreneurs work on. And then we reach out to organizations like yours, to others, to VCs, and help us disseminate the information that's harder to get, which is personal data, basically. Like, what do you identify as, LGBTQ or straight? What are you, a veteran or not? Are you an immigrant or not? What race do you identify with, or races do you identify with, and so on. So that's the information that's really hard to get. So we need to combine the two, overlay them, and with that, we get those super fancy maps that you can see on the inclusionindexes.com, and get all the graphics and everything else. So that's the first part. The second part, though, is this is not a shaming exercise. So if you see that the city of Detroit barely shows up for LGBTQ entrepreneurs, may show up for female entrepreneurs, actually does, that's not a shaming exercise. It's saying kind of, you bad people, you should do more. It's more like, hey, look, here's a quantification of the unrealized potential. If you had supported female entrepreneurs more forcefully, this is the additional jobs that would have been created in Detroit or in Los Angeles, and so on. And that's the same with funding, same with exits, and of course that then the communities can do more with that. So we're really trying to showcase this is the potential that you're missing out on just because you're not focusing on those communities. So not a shaming exercise, quite the opposite. It's like identifying and quantifying opportunities for growth and improvement.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing I tell myself why I went from being an entrepreneur to being on the other side of the table, an evil VC, is that it's just so much more important, particularly these days where corporations and things that are not government are playing a much larger role in how we are shaping ourselves as a society, and thinking of how we ought to conduct ourselves as a people, not just nationally, but also internationally. And if the people who get the money are the ones who become the CEOs of these places, I would like to be the person that decides who gets the money. That's kind of how I think of my role, right? It's just a founder advocate. It's the step toward, that direction. I'm curious, have, recent events, take your pick, kind of had any impact on internal discussions that StartOut's having with things you're working on, or ways that you are looking at problems, or any interesting conversations shake out?
So most people probably know we've just gone through a pandemic and they're still in it. So it's been a little bit of an issue. I know, big news flash. It's been very, very hard on so many people. So I don't want to make light of it, of course. But what it also has meant is been a flight to safety. When you look at what we call the evil side, I actually say the wonderful side of VCs who are supporting our companies, they, a lot of them had to change their approach as well. Flight to safety means sponsoring people or funding or people already, and so on. So for underrepresented communities, that's actually been a pretty tough year. So the internal conversations we have, how do we overcome that? And fortunately, at StartOut now, we've already been we kind of were prepared for COVID, if anyone could be prepared, because we put everything online anyway. So most of our programs are online, like our investor portal is online. Anyone who's looking into diversifying their portfolio, right, they can actually participate and get some deal flow from there. So because we wanted to be all over the US, we didn't want to be just in the main areas, and we wanted to be open to our whole community, we already had all that set up online. So in a way, we were fortunate that we had, set up all those programs and all the access to anyone throughout the United States. So during COVID, suddenly, when personal meetings weren't and still aren't possible, that turned out to be a huge benefit. And we have never seen a bigger run on our programs. We've never seen bigger successes, actually. Last year was an incredibly successful year for many of our entrepreneurs and StartOut itself. And we've been excited to open up those opportunities to so many people who otherwise wouldn't have connected. So that's been a huge upside, and we're excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like what a rough couple of years, right? I just, for those of you who don't know, I see a couple staff in the chat here. I got my second COVID vaccine yesterday, so I'm just like, I can see through space and time, because that's my experience with this. But on top of the pandemic, there's just so much that's coming out about why in inclusion and why, being very diversity thinking forward is important. I know, one of the ways that I've tried to challenge myself to be a better gay identifying male is to make sure that I'm making more time in my day to help make sure that my tribe is represented at the table, whether that's as a function of getting in front of more investments who wouldn't have, a lead and otherwise, or bringing more staff to work at 500 who identify as LGBTQ. That's been made very important to me, not just, again, because of pandemic stuff, but because of like just all of the social unrest, I guess you'd call it, out there. How do you see your community, the Start Out community, interacting with this idea? How are your members, out there trying to tackle this problem if they are?
So we have members on the entrepreneur side, right? Our beneficiaries, and then we have all the supporters that we need in the whole ecosystem, like the VCs, the accelerators, incubators, corporate partners, business development opportunities, and so on. So they see it very differently. So for the entrepreneurs, it's been a rough year, no question. But the ones we've seen, the ones who've been innovative, and we've seen incredible stories of like a restaurant financing business. You would think that's the worst business to be in when all the restaurants close, right? But guess what? They found a way to get around it, to finance restaurants, free finance meals, and things like that. So they've I think tripled or quadrupled in revenue. So it's phenomenal what they've done over that time. So they're the ones who've been creative, and our community tends to be very creative because they've been forced to for so long. They're doing incredibly well. Not all of them, let me be very clear, but the ones who managed to pivot. Cauldron is another example of one of our growth lab companies. They're in the experience business and like in-person experiences in like bars, restaurants, and so on. And so they turn it around and have it like a kit getting sent out with the software attached to it, being super cool about what they're doing. They grew like crazy last year. So all those organizations that have been able to basically make lemonade out of lemons, they've been pretty amazing. And what I've seen is incredibly inspiring. On the business side, we see more and more companies wanting to do the right thing. So in spite of marketing budgets have been slashed, or like, no more hires, or whatever happened over the last 12 months, 13 months, it's been super tough on a lot of people, but nearly everyone wants to do the right thing. So what we have seen is an incredible openness to follow our guidance and other organizations like us, and help increase diversity, because the diversity concept is pretty much accepted with nearly everyone we deal with. Diversity leads to higher performance, and that's awesome. But it's still not so easy to just implement. So we see all that happening left and right, and it's actually heartwarming. It's incredible, and makes me incredibly optimistic that we're going to make major strides over the next couple of years, just because the mindset is there to make things happen.
Do you feel like the way that organizations, like not necessarily, not Start Out, of course, but like, do you feel like the way that other organizations who are coming to the table, kind of responding to the current environment, do you feel like the way that they're coming to the table is the right approach? So for example, is it enough to say we're going to spin up an opportunity fund specifically targeted toward this demographic group? Is it enough to, change training, these sorts of things? Or do you think, like, what advice would you give to any VC who might be, watching, or any government or corporate that might be watching? How do you even begin to approach this if you come from a less than diverse population?
Look, it's never enough till we have totally equity, right? So, but that's something we all have to work toward, and we have to work toward together. So the advice is simply to utilize this incredible moment, let no crisis go to waste. So we are in if you will, in an economic crisis, if you will, but we have this incredible opportunity going forward coming out of it. And let's use that and reach out to additional communities. The LGBTQ community, we welcome you at StartOut. There's other organizations that deal with the Black community, with the female founders. There's all those incredible organizations. There's your organization, like the accelerators, incubators, Fireside Startup, who really focus on diversity. So let's just let's make sure that as we have a chance to reboot some of these activities, to simply add a little bit of focus on the diversity front. Let's make sure, and I'm saying a little bit because it's really not that much of a change. If you reach out to organizations like as VCs, you reach out to schools, or reach out to communities to find your deal flow, adding 4 or 5 or 6 sources is really minimal. Your associates can really go out there and get that deal flow. Make sure you have access to it. It's not that much work. It's just a mindset issue. And, all those organizations, VCs, are incredibly smart people working for them. So might as well use their smarts and just add it to, add that little component to it. And I think we'll see huge changes. So that's my hope, and that's my advice, is like, don't change everything around, everything that's worked for you in the past, but reach out to the sources and groups where you traditionally haven't. And guess what? You'll find some amazing deals. Entrepreneurs find some amazing organizations, accelerators, groups that they would love to work with. And you can pretty quickly figure out in early conversations whether they're serious or not. But guess what? Like, I don't have a percentage, but maybe 90-95% of people we talk to, they absolutely are serious. And so that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's so important, to be able to have that conversation, or at least to start having it. Never to waste a crisis, to your point. What you mentioned though, that it's not done till we get to complete equity. Like, what are the 3 things you think, like 3 steps toward that you think would make the biggest impact? Like what can people do, kind of beyond what we've already discussed, but like what does that look like?
That's an awesome question, and I'm a little inhibited here because I know the audience at the speakers day of your whole day. You've assembled an incredible number of experts in that field. So I'm not sure I'm one of those experts in terms of the most important 3 things to do. But I do believe that what I mentioned before, simply being aware of the additional sources where you could go and source people or talent for your business, source entrepreneurs for your accelerators, source entrepreneurs for your investments, that makes a huge difference. The other part is the trickle down effect, right? So it's well known that a culture is starting at the top, and we've seen incredible progress in terms of, speaking of the venture community, internal diversity. They're certainly not at the forefront of inclusion traditionally, and it makes sense if you have 3, 4, 5-person shops doing great work. It's really hard to have full diversity, but we've seen tremendous interest in diversifying the VC's own teams or the leadership teams on early stage companies that they're managing. And that is again, simply a matter of looking elsewhere, taking a little more time, get outside of your comfort zone, and make sure you take the time to get diversity early on as part of your DNA. It'll pay off so handsomely. There's tons of research that shows that diverse teams perform better. So it's not a good thing to do. It's a required thing to do to boost your IRR. So that is something that's really cool. So you're not doing anyone a favor per se, but you're just kind of doing your job, doing your job better. So I won't tell anyone how to do their jobs. It'd be very, presumptuous. But in terms of, this is all part of what we want and need to do today. And on top of that, it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. What's next for StartOut? Like, where are you all headed? I can answer this question for 500, but let's hear yours first.
Yeah, well, the first thing we're doing, again, to your earlier question, measuring. So let me, shamelessly pitch something here. All of you who are entrepreneurs, or all of you who work with entrepreneurs, please go to inclusionindexes.org and put in your data. It's like, we can't do all our work. And by the way, it's not just for LGBTQ entrepreneur, it's for female entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs of all races, and so on. So it's really for everyone. We want to know what's going on. We want to know intersectionalities. We want to know everything. So that's really, by the way, this is not, obviously the data is completely anonymous and protected, but the insights are all free for everyone to check. So that is something, that's a big push that we're currently doing. The other push is doubling down on what works. We found that our investor relations work really well, relations to VCs, angel investors, angel groups, and so on. So getting more people, more entrepreneurs funded. We're also focusing very much on our mentorship program. Mentorship works. So that's super cool. Where we do have to do more work is measuring the micro level of the impact. So how exactly does mentorship work? How exactly can we improve our matchmaking? And so we're doing a great job manually, but how can we be more effective in doing that? So that's something we definitely are figuring out right now, working very hard at it. But it's really overall, it's recognizing that so many organizations, sponsors, VCs, they all want to do the right thing. So let's harness that goodwill, put it to good use, and get more entrepreneurs investment ready. And when investment ready, getting funded.
Money is the answer. Also, sometimes the problem. Also, sometimes the question. So it's all of these things. With like that in mind, what I'm going to jam into the comments for anybody who's listening is just a link that I put together just for this talk. It's just a quick Bitly link that two things. One, I linked to the inclusion indexes.org that Andres mentioned. Cannot recommend this enough. This is something that we partner with StartOut with about, and it's so important. Can't make decisions without data, right? We can feel all we want to feel, but data. Two, the second link there is a link to my calendar, and if you're a VC who's trying to find a way, let's see, Anya, stop that, Anya, you're making me blush. If you're a VC who's trying to find a way to get more of your deal flow visible, particularly if it's of the you're interested in diversity and that kind of stuff, I can definitely get you connected inside of 500. That's a place where I'm passionate. I'm also, looking for individuals who mentor, who come from diverse backgrounds. I mean, if there's a way that you want to contribute to the diversity that 500 holds so near and dear, I definitely want to hear from you. So go ahead and feel free to just drop 15 minutes on my calendar. That link will get you there. And I would just love to hear from all of you about what can we do? What is it that you think that is a way for 500 to use its very global brand, its presence, certainly its exposure, to support organizations and partner with organizations like we do with StartOut to support localities or individual investments. These are all the things that we're trying to tackle on a global level, and it's always good to talk to your customer. I will tell you, as a startup founder, it's always good to talk to your customer, and you are all my customer. Well, I'm looking through our comments here. Not a very question-oriented bunch, gotta say. That's okay. Andres, I suppose, one thing that's just really been on my mind, particularly, with my experience to start out, and just a quick backstory for the audience, there was the first group that I joined when I moved to San Francisco, because it's LGBTQ business people, entrepreneurs. Great. That's 100% me. And I love supporting the organization. We take, we get our deals from there, all that kind of stuff. What I wonder is, for StartOut's, what's a place where, you talked a little bit where the organization is going, but where's a place where, you're really excited to grow? So you mentioned that if you're a VC, you can go to the online portal and get deal flow there. Is that a place you really want to lean into, say through the end of this year, or is there what line is particularly interesting to you just individually?
Well, first of all, Anya is right. I want to just make that clear. Aaron is great, so I have to make you blush a little bit. Thank you, Anya, for that comment. No, I actually want to go in a totally different direction with the question. So, one of the things is we need to change the narrative of how our contributions and underrepresented communities' contributions to the economy, to society are viewed. So actually, one of the things we're doing that I haven't mentioned yet is, yes, of course, we're doing all those KPIs, metrics, more impact, and all this stuff, but you also have to talk about it. And you have to talk about it in a way that that people are excited about it, they understand and want to support. And so you really got to build that link. And so one thing that we're doing this year a lot more is we have all those amazing stories. We have incredible people in our community that do fantastic things. Let's give more shout outs. Let's make this, let's show people and also show the challenges, the journeys, what worked, what didn't work. It's interesting when events is kind of, the 10 worst mistakes I've ever made in my life. They're very popular. So people, it's not Schadenfreude. It's more like kind of, no, we want to know how people dealt with other issues. So it's kind of humanizing the experience, making sure people understand what we're contributing. People understand in terms of the narrative that Black and female and LGBTQ founders face very similar issues, some different ones, but also very similar issues like anyone else. So let's just demystify the whole thing and get people excited about the stories and get people excited supporting each other. Because, we strongly believe that rising tides lift all boats. And that's why we're doing those surveys with all those communities. And we're welcoming, any kind of questions on how we're dealing with it, any kind of, if you have ecosystem builders, you see any out there in the audience who want to know more what we're doing and how we're doing it, by all means, happy to share. It's a matter of getting everyone advanced here and sharing that sentiment with everyone.
Well, Andres Wydler for president 2024? I don't know, whatever it is, right? Yeah, that's terrific. Well, we've got about a minute left. I see we've got one question. If you want parting thoughts, this would be a good time. If not, maybe we talked to Anya's question about anything that you would have, any specific advice you'd have for anybody who's in the Taiwan ecosystem, specifically that, the topic of diversity and all that is a lot harder out there.
So that's a great question. And we always ask, when do you expand internationally? So we have people from actually 60 countries in our community. We do not claim to be expert in LGBTQ entrepreneurship in Rwanda or Poland or Taiwan for that matter. So we have, it's always a good idea to just participate in the community itself. So for example, we have a network where we can identify what you want. We have a forum as well. And a lot of organizations have those kind of ways. So post your questions in there. In our case, on the network, you can search for other people in Taiwan. So there's other ways of doing that, but it's really a matter of just going out there and sharing your story or requests or your needs carefully and